So it's a fifth community call. Welcome aboard. It's the first community call in this year. I'm very happy to see you folks here. The last community call was quite crazy. Some strange people joined us from the internet, and that was really crazy. I hope that's not going to happen today. And today we are going to talk about a few things. So first of all, thank you very much for the intro information that the folks provided. And the next thing we are going to talk today is version 1.0 planning of the library. And then at last, we'll be happy to hear what you want from DeepPavlov Library so that we could incorporate that into our work. Here with us is Fyodor Ignatov. Fyodor Ignatov is our lead engineer. He owns DeepPavlov Library, DeepPavlov Agent, DeepPavlov Dream as an engineering lead. And we will be happy to answer your questions as much as we can. And once other folks from our team will join us, we'll be happy to get their answers as well. So version 1.0 planning. So I've just looked a couple of days ago and into our releases page at GitHub, and it turns out that there are about 45 releases. 45 releases. Our library was born in February 2018, so in this February we will be 3 years old, and yet our version is 0.14. And Mikhail Burtsov asked me several times when I joined DeepPavlov Library, DeepPavlov Lab last year, when are we going to ship version 1 of the library? And we've been focused on many different things, and we also shipped several releases since last summer. But now it's a good time to begin building vision for what's going to be happening with the version 1 of the library. And for that, we prepared this slide. It's what you can do with DeepPavlov Library. It's not exactly an architectural slide that gives you a perspective of what is connected to what and so on, but it gives you a good understanding of what you can do with DeepPavlov Library. We have a relatively large number of natural language understanding and more generic NLP components. We have obviously NER, which is probably the most popular named entity recognition model we have, and probably one of the most popular models in Russia. And we have number of predefined predefined intent classifiers for different domains, the slot fillers, and we have different things like classifiers for sentiment analysis and cell detection and so on. As you also know, last year we shipped our knowledge graphs components like KBQA and entity linking. So we have an opportunity or ability, I would say. We have an ability to extract entities from a given text and link that to a knowledge graph. By default, we support knowledge bases like Wikidata. We're also working on integrating it with WikiHow, and our framework in general allows obviously to connect to different knowledge graphs. So far, the key thing is for the knowledge graph to support Sparkle query language. We also have a number of skill builders. Some of them are new, some of them are old, and we also allow you to build to add different components built by third-party systems like Rasa and AIMO, like Program Y and so on. Recently, we shipped support for Hugging Face Transformers models for classification, and we have a blog post that we are going to ship, publish in our blog in the coming days that will show you an example how you can use Hugging Face Transformer models in DeepPavlov Library. We also ship ASR and TTS from NVIDIA. And we also have components that enable you exposing your conversational AI systems via Telegram different channels through Microsoft Bot framework, and to a couple of AI assistants like Amazon Alexa in English and Yandex Alice in Russian. And at least but not last, our models are available through different interfaces. You can work with them in command line interface. You can interact with them in your Python applications or Python notebooks. We also allow you to raise API of any of the models we have. We have more than 200 configs in the DeepPavlov library. And you can raise API, raise REST API, and access the same models through REST. And we also have some support for sockets. Finally, I would like to highlight a couple of things. So most of our models used to be built on TensorFlow version 1. We are now supporting more and more models built on top of PyTorch. And this is something we're going to talk later today. And one more thing. Last year, we worked on a component called multitask BERT, which allowed you to build several classifiers built on top of BERT, where you can save your GPU by having just one BERT model loaded into it and having several heads, where each head is a separate classifier for different tasks. So that's where we are today. And we also have several things like goal-oriented framework called GoBot. We worked really hard in the last year on it to enable you to build goal-oriented skills. And we have other things like FAQ, ODQA, which is open domain question answering. And I also really hope that I don't have to explain what FAQ means. And text question answering. And we also have some older things like e-commerce and sec-to-seconds bots, which we didn't really see any big traction for. And we also have something called Factoid. Truth to be said, Factoid is still something that is cooking. It's not yet in the library, so actually it will be in the library in the coming release, but right now it's not yet there. So that's where we are today, and that's a huge number of things you can do in the library. But the problem is that a lot of the things, they have multiple models for them. As I said before, we have more than 200 models, 200 different configurations that allow you to solve different kinds of tasks. And some of these models have seen more usage, some of them have seen less usage. And this is in part because we don't have a great documentation for everything. We don't have how-do's for everything. But it's also because some of those models maybe became more specific and maybe not really important for production users, or maybe they were used in some different competitions, but were not really used outside of research field. And we want you guys to use the library as a product. We don't just do research. So it is really important to rethink what our library is going to be all about, and what is important to leave for version 1.0, and what probably should be deprecated. We started this planning process about a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and we have a public board. You can go to github.com/deepmeep/deeppavlov/project/1, where you can see these tenets organized into different individual tasks. So you can see what we are going to do. You can see what we are working on. You can share your ideas there. You can give your feedback through the system and let us know what you think. And here you can see the key things that we are working on. There is also a link. Let me take a look if I can share quickly the link with you. Maybe not really. We also have a forms, Google Forms page where you can share the feedback with us. If you have seen invitation to this community call anywhere, be that Facebook, or Twitter, or Telegram, and so on. We also have a accompanying link that allows you to fill in the survey and let us know what you like, what you don't like in the library. We have a lot of things to talk about, but today we want to talk about like a couple of things. We want to talk about documentation and our early perspective on refactoring. We also have an idea that we want to ship new models in PyTorch, and once we will be done with refactoring of models, we will also begin work on migrating models to PyTorch. PyTorch has seen tremendous use in publications in the last couple of years. And even though in the beginning it was relatively small compared to TensorFlow version 1, today is heavily used across different research organizations in the world. And our plan is to migrate to PyTorch. But anyways, today we want to talk a little bit about just two tenets, documentation refactoring. And here is like the moment where you can also let us know what you think. You have chat, so we can easily write down things what you believe is important in for this particular tenet. So for documentation of what we've heard from people so far, and also our own understanding is that we need to provide lots of how do's for all major models. We started some work in this regard. I can show you part of this work in our documentation. I can show you a bad example, and then I can show you a good example. So the bad example is here. So for example, here on docs.deepavlov.ai, we have information about classification. We have lots of different models, but it's not really clear what particular models are designed for. You can't quickly figure out that we have models, for example, for insult detection or different models for intent detection and so on. So that's what we want to improve. But more importantly, what we want to do is to bring more how do's and more tutorials to the system. A good example is our GoBot framework. If you go to GoBot DialogBot, go into DialogBot documentation page, it has a number of how do's or tutorials here. So for example, this tutorial, all tutorials we write are written in Google Colab or iPad notebooks. And in that case, you have to run them on your own system. Here is an example of, for example, how you can build a simple harvesters maintenance skill for our DP demo. We hope it's a good example. So we see some requirements. You have to write some configuration files for the goal-oriented skill. Then you have then you have the part for training the slot filler and the intent classifier, and then the bot itself. Finally, you can pack everything. And you've got the model specifically designed around your tasks based on the GoBot framework. We also have tutorials how to integrate things with our DeepPavlov DP, which is an open source multi-skill AI assistant. Here is the instruction. And we use the same approach for other components. For example, we have intent catcher, which we shipped in the last version of DeepPavlov Library. And it also has a tutorial how to integrate intent catcher into DeepPavlov DP. Here's also the tutorial notebook, which is very similar to the one we've just seen about goal-oriented framework. We use the same template. It's very similar in it. So we have to install dependencies, then we load them as intent data. Here we use some pre-built intent data that we used for Alexa Pride 2019 challenge. Then we show how you can add new data to the system. Here's where we add new items. Here we add new custom intent. Then we dump data, configure it, train the model, and pack it, so that later you can use it in your own intent catcher deployment. And you can use this approach to also integrate it with DeepPavlov DP, which is our multi-skill AI assistant. So this is an example of how you want to build our how do's moving forward. We want them to be probably more beautiful than they look today. But that's what we want to do with how do's. If you feel that you want something else in documentation, it's a good chance for you to say it right now, to write it down as a chat. We also want to have two kinds of how do's for simple scenarios and for more advanced scenarios like AI assistants or building complex Nlp pipelines. And we also want these examples, as I said before, be as interactive as possible, because we want to host them also in Google Colab, like those couple examples I just showed you earlier. And another thing we want to focus on in our documentation efforts is to make sure that when you go to documentation, everything is designed around not just generic names, but is focused as much as possible around particular problems. So for example, we won't have a classification area, but we will have things like sentiment analysis or insult detection or emotion classification when we will ship that in the DeepPavlov library and so on. So that's what we want to do in the library documentation for now. We are very open to your input, and if you feel that there is something that you could improve, we will be really happy to hear your feedback and incorporate into our documentation. So I think one of the best ways to continue is to maybe have some sort of a documentation. Some sort of discussion about the tenant and then moving forward. I don't know, maybe someone wants to say a word or two about the documentation of their experience. Maybe Tatiana could step in if you want. She's not with us right now. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I can move on to the next part of what we want to work on. So the next thing is we want to work on the refactoring of the library. As I said before, we want to move individual models into top categories. This is important both for documentation and also for the library itself, so they could easily see this kind of top categories for models. The second thing is we want to prioritize models that we built for Alexa Prize 2019 challenge and make them available for you in the library. So things like emotion classification, dialogue acts classification, topics classification will be added to the library. And the third thing that we want to focus on in the refactoring process for now is deprecation of old models. So we have models like summarization and e-commerce skill and so on. And we feel that they're not really used for now. And we plan to move them to the deprecated list of things for version 1 of our library. So if you look at the library today, that's how it looks like. Still don't have the Factoid things. And our perspective of what's going to happen with the library in version 1 is we will remove a couple of skill builders. We will add Factoid. And we'll add several components from our Alexa Prize 2019 social bot. We'll probably add more components moving forward, and we would really love to hear what you want to have in the library. So in general, this is more or less what we wanted to share with you today. We would really love to hear what you want from the DeepPavlov library. I'm happy that some of you have used library in the past. For those of you who are newcomers, we would love to know what you specifically want to have in our library, what you want to use, I mean. And do not hesitate to write in the chat. Sure. Yes, I see. Give me a moment. I will unlock you. Ask to unmute.
Yeah. Hi, I have, in some sense, maybe a broad question. In some sense, it's a specific one. So, let's say, in our organization, we have a project which I'm not currently deeply involved in, but still. And you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that you are going to work on the integration to the Apache Spark, right?
Oh, what? Apache Spark?
Oh, I missed that. Like at the very beginning.
No,
right?
I didn't say that.
Oh, yeah. That probably
No problem.
that removes my question. Yeah,
no. Apache Spark. Go ahead.
Right, because for instance, yeah, in the project which I mentioned, we do have a lot of documents, and we want to perform different NLP tasks on them. And well, basically, because it's a large amount of data, we are going to use it with an Apache Spark. And for Apache Spark currently exists probably the most successful library, so to speak, is that one called Spark NLP from the company called John Snow Labs. And I just wondered, so at some point, will the users of your library be able to run
DeepPavlov
DeepPavlov models to the learning and the inference on the cluster for instance, on the Apache Spark cluster?
Great question. This actually goes down to custom Nlp pipelines thing. Couple things come to my mind here. First, last year we participated in a competition called ProChтение, which required us to do a similar kind of task. We had lots of documents to process and so on, and we actually used our own NLP orchestrator or conversational orchestrator called DeepPavlov Agent. And we actually used our library components and other things inside that orchestrator to work with different documents. So one of the ways to work with documents is possibly DeepPavlov Agent. And as I said before, our components are designed in such a way that their integration into such a system is straightforward. I can give you an example. It's not going to be exactly the thing we worked on Prachitini, but it's going to be very similar. Because, I mean, multi-skill AI assistant in a way is similar to that. So here is multi-skill AI assistant, and it also has an orchestrator inside it, DeepPavlov agent. Agent itself is obtained from its repository, and you just add different components to the Docker Compose first. Here, you can see different components like selectors or components from, for example, motion classification, spelling preprocessing, and so on. And we also have that pipeline thing, which you can use to define the graph, the computational graph that you can use to process your documents. We have different groups of annotators that can be designed one after another to control how your documents are processed by the system. So in a way, we already allow you to build something like this processing machine using our technology. We don't yet have any examples how to use our components in other systems, but we could probably write down an example and show how one could do that.
Yeah, thanks. I see. Basically, you have that custom orchestrator, custom agent that needs to be deployed in a cluster, right?
Yeah, so I mean, if you already guys use Apache Spark, then probably what would be helpful is some sort of a how-do example, and that's something we can add to our pipeline for tasks for releasing version 1 of the library. And if you don't have Apache Spark or anything like that yet, then in that case, you can probably try our DeepPavlov agent.
No, we do have, and we already started to use that Spark Nlp library, which is, well, it's have a free version, but with some enterprise features, it's not free library. Yeah, I'm just asking because, well, Apache Spark is getting, or maybe already is the most, let's say, widespread framework in the big data community. So it's it would be, I guess it would be much how to say, much easier for the broader for the broader
audience
amount of people, right, to start using your library if you will do some kind of integration, I guess. Yeah, because people already do have some data and
already have the pipelines.
Okay. Yeah, already have the pipelines
yep.
just to store the data, and they themselves involve those things like Apache Spark, and then just on top of it, it would be easier.
Makes a lot of sense, and I wrote down it into the feedback list for us. That's a very good thing to hear. Thank you very much, Dmitry. Mm-hmm. That's a great thing. I didn't come up to that, but that's exactly why we have this community call. We want to hear from the community what you guys want. Everyone else, feel free to do the same. Just write down what that you want to ask question in voice. You can do it. Well, okay, I can do it probably in Russian too, and I will be happy to answer it. But I will translate it to English in that case, so that it could be available in the recording. The silence really kills me. Don't be afraid. Write down what you want to do, what kind of task you want to solve. Is it named entity extraction or entity linking or intent detection or chatbots, whatever. Write down things what you want to work on. I also written down in Russian too. So it could be easier to understand what I'm talking about. I know that my pronunciation is not the best one. So you don't have any other questions, requests, or something like that? I mean, don't be shy. If you don't use the library, it's fine. You just want to understand what you think about when you want to use it. Why did you come here? You said that you want to learn more about library. Okay, tell me what specific task you want to work on. It's really a bit painful when you cannot see faces of other people. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I haven't looked at the documentation of your library, but just again back to the project in our organization. So, do you have any components in your library which allow their relation extraction? For instance, if I have a NER task in some document, and then I get something like an entity and a number, or like an entity or and an address, for instance, something like that. Well, something numerical, and I want at least to relate those two things. So, do you have any components in the library which allow that? Like the temperature and the value of the temperature, or for instance the city and the value of the temperature in the city, something like that. Just simple relation.
There are two ways to look at this. I think in one way we don't have a specific component called relationship extraction. However, we have something interesting that might be useful. So let me go to demo.deepavlov.ai and show you, I think, okay, or maybe text question answering. So here is an example. It's a text question answering. So we have some free text, and we can try to ask a question that is that there is an answer to in this text. So, like, what country is under pressure? And we know that the United States is ready to engage in talks about North Korea. So it does not specifically say this North Korea, but at least you can extract a phrase that is connected to your answer, not to your question. That's one of the things that you could probably use. Another thing you could probably use is OTQA. It's more direct. So, for example, what does computational linguistics study? We have phrase, but this one will go to the database. No, that's maybe not exactly appropriate. Or text query is more useful here. Yeah, so we don't have, I mean, this is the best we have. We don't have specifically this kind of component, but it will be really interesting to think about adding it to the library. I don't know, maybe Denise or Fedya could, or Alex could step in and share their thoughts. If you want, just let me know. I can give Denise and maybe Alex, yes. Folks? Does anybody? No?
No, I can't tell more than these examples.
Yeah, it seems like we will have to think about building this kind of model.
And just one more question. So I'm not an expert in NLP. Just have some few knowledges on that. So maybe there is some let's say some terminology. So for I mean, for instance, for entity recognition, we know that it's a NER task, and there are a lot of, I don't know, articles and libraries which perform NER tasks, and maybe there is some kind of a notion for this entity recognition task. So one can find an algorithm at least, and you just do not yet have it in your library, but maybe there are standard approaches already to solve this kind of tasks, or there are not. So
wait, we have different approaches to named entity recognition. We have several models, in other words. But what you're talking about was the relationship extraction. Are you still talking about that, or are you talking about something else?
Yeah, I'm talking about the relationship extractions, but I mean, yeah, right. When you already have an entities, well, how to extract the relationships?
So this is usually called the relationship extraction. You've been correct about the name. That's how it's usually called. But obviously my colleagues could correct me, but that's how it's usually called. I've seen several projects that were focused on this kind of stuff back in 2000s. So there were obviously multiple maybe research projects in this space. I'm not sure if any of our competitors have relationship extraction as a component in their libraries. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm not sure if there is any product where this thing is available, at least in the open source libraries. Maybe.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the non-free libraries, there exist such components.
Wait. There is something interesting here. What we do have is we have entity linking. It's still not the same, but it's also close to the foundation for building what we are talking about. So this is very interesting. I think I can show a demo. So now we have the social bot that is called TP now. I'm just not sure if it has a factoid in it. Let me take a look at the model. The skills harvesters. No, we don't have factoid here, unfortunately. So we have a KBQA model that we will show a demo of it, and it is in the library. KBQA allows you to ask questions in natural language, and then those questions will be transformed into a SPARQL query that goes over to the database. But what we are also working on is where we extract entities from the phrase, and we try to find those relationships between entities based on information. Yeah, it's also connected to knowledge graph. Look, this is a very cool task. We will also add it to our list of things that we can work on. It's a very cool task.
Yeah, because if you think about it, I mean, those great competitions which you all take part in. I mean, those Alexa, how it's called, competitions. It's all great, but for the organizations, it's sometimes like more useful to just to get more simple information from the data that they have. And when there is an unstructured data, you can perform NER and then just to try to do something more with it, right? To at least to associate numerical values with
Yes.
what it actually is in this document. It's I guess it would be quite useful for the people. I mean, yeah.
Indeed, it is useful. Denise, can you hear me? Maybe you can comment
Yes,
from your experience.
Can you repeat what kind of relationship between entities do you mean?
Well, in particular, in my case, it's just well, medical documents, right? And in that medical document, you have, for instance, it's some kind of tests, medical tests, and you have the result, right? And it's in a free form, unstructured, just a piece of text, and you have that this well, substance in the blood, for instance, it has this value. I mean, the amount or what kind of those medical units which apply to those substances. So another substance is in a test result, it has another value, right? And it's all in the single piece of text, right? And you just want to relate what substance has which value in the result. That's one of the examples. Just
what are the documents about, by the way? It's papers or research reports or what, by the way?
No, it's well, it's
medical.
Okay, in my particular example, it's well, medical, could be prescriptions or medical tests or medical, just something from the medical area, right? Yeah, and the people usually like write them in a free form, just not each time they fill some kind of forms. It could be just the piece of text. And when you have a lot of them, and when you have an access to them, it would be interesting to get some data from them. But I could imagine another kind of information, like I don't know, like let's say some news, and you just want to relate some cities to.
So the task like slot filling tasks. So in my understanding, so and in some NLP domains we have same task like find relation, something like that. So we have two entity and we need to bind it by relationship like object of part of maybe instance of something like that. We have these methods, and what that do you said before? It's like that slot filling. You can search something by these terms in the internet.
Slot filling, you call, right?
Yes, yes. And in our case, we can we use these techniques in task for GoBot. Daniel can say more about GoBots because many GoBots are based on these tasks. Sorry for my language. What's it mean? You have some frame and you need to fill frame maybe slots, and you need to fill them. Yes. in your medical domain?
Well, kind of. Well, well, I have a set of my entity types, and I just want to relate. When I have run the NER task, I want to relate well, the numerical values to part of those entities, to those which I have found. Not it's not like a predefined set of. Well, it's I have the finite set of entities, of course, but it's not necessary that this particular document have the value for this slot, but probably it's kind of what you have described. Yeah. So I have entities and I have slots.
So actually, in this case, it sounds like a very creative task, and you can solve it by use, for example, embedding by find some similarity for several examples, right examples, gold examples, for new entity. I mean, you have some entity and you try to understand it's right for you for your task of classification, and you just can measure some similarity metric from your goals entity. In this case, it can be some value, maybe some numbers numbers of units, medical components. I don't know. You can use, and yes, you can as embedder you can use BERT, and it model. This model provided by our
library.
Yes, and I think you can do it. Maybe
but for the slot filling itself, for the slot filling itself, your library does not yet provide like some solutions which are already built.
Actually, I don't. I'm not expert in this direction, because I solve another task, but maybe Vasily Korotkov can say about that. But in this call, yes. So 1 second. Yes, he solved this task, and I think he has some understanding, maybe a box methods.
Yes, that's the guy who was one of the leads of the previous run of your NLP course, right? I mean,
yes.
That's the guy.
Yeah,
you're right.
So I will probably reach him in the Telegram.
You can also use our forum at DeepPavlov.ai. Right down there, we try to answer to questions. So you could do it the same way, and then we will ask Vasily to provide feedback, because I think this is super useful for not only you, but for many other users who want to have similar kind of functionality.
Right.
Okay. This is super useful, and Denis, thank you very much for stepping in and answering Dmitri's question. If anybody else has any kind of feedback, we have 10 more minutes. So feel free to ask your question in the chat, and I will unmute you, or if you want, you can write in Russian, and then I will translate in English and answer in English in the chat. And while we are here, I'll also share a link with you. There is a link to our chat. Sorry, to our survey. I urge you to go to this page and to respond to our survey to let us know what you think if you want to take your time. It's not very long, but it would be super useful if you could share your thoughts about the library today. And on the same subject, another thing that I want to highlight is something that we're very interested in is if you want to use library in multi-CPU and multi-GPU use cases where you have multiple graphical cards or multiple processors or multiple thread support, and you want to use all of that in your production systems. I would also really love to hear about that. So, any more questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, one more question. So you told that your library is based on the TensorFlow version 1, but you are intentionally fully moving to the PyTorch, so you're obsoleting your models which are on top of the TensorFlow 1, or they will be existing in the two versions, or
That's a good question. So let me go back to slides. So our plan is the following. We want to, what we're doing right now is we are doing housekeeping. So we look at all of our models we have. As I said before, we have more than 200 different configurations that represent models. And we want to do three kinds of things. We want to define top categories for things. And in the slides, you can see the top categories, something like this. Then we want to remove some of the models that are no longer relevant or no longer supported. Like, for example, summarization and e-commerce skill and sec-to-sec bot and so on. And that's like thing number 2. And then we want to go through different particular models. And if there is something that is very rarely used, we don't want to support them anymore. Once we will decide about all the models that we want to keep, we will then put a plan in motion to migrate those models from TensorFlow 1 to PyTorch. This is our current vision for what we're going to do. So that's, I hope, the answer you've been looking for. Sure. Give me a sec.
Yeah, and in this case, again, I'm not an expert in deep learning and in a PyTorch, just have some knowledges. But am I right that PyTorch has not yet a good support for the TPU, for instance? And if so, if I'm not wrong, how your models? So how you are? So you do not, you are not going to support the Google technology at all, or you are just relying on the support of the PyTorch of this hardware?
Well, I'm not sure if I can agree with you. There are ways to enable PyTorch on Google TPU. There is a project called PyTorch XLA, which allows you to let PyTorch connect to cloud TPUs and use TPU cores on as devices. So there is a way to use Google TPUs with PyTorch.
Okay, so there is already a way. Okay.
Any more questions or feedback? Dmitry is obviously showing a great example of questions and feedback. So if anyone wants to ask your questions, it's a great time to do for you it now. Okay. Okay, so as I said before, we are doing this practice in the open. We have a project here at GitHub, or we have a plan for what we're going to do with the library on its way to V1. We are updating it about once per week, each sprint. We are not going to share everything in the system. So like we will have some Google Docs and so on. They probably won't be available to everyone. But the tasks themselves are available, so you can go to a site and check out what we're working on right now. You can also leave your comments. So for example, we can add to backlog that we're going to do right now is relationship extraction component. And we can add it to backlog. And we can transform it into the issue. Let me go to sticky notes. From today's conversation, we can also add integration by Spark. Obviously, we will look into this kind of stuff and make decisions and prioritize them. So it's not like everything that is going to be added to the backlog will eventually be shipped into V1 of the library. But if you want to be heard, if you want to make some of the components to be shipped in V1, this is a great opportunity for you to be heard. You can go here, you can add items to the backlog. I hope you can. But if you can't, you at least can comment here. And yeah, you should be able to obviously add them to backlog because you can obviously add issues to the system.
Yeah, and just one more question about your versioning. So that was some so the fact that you are releasing that your first version finally, it's just because you have collected some critical amount of components that you can by yourself name as a fully version 1, or it was just a pressure of of your you know
there is no pressure.
I mean, management.
There is no big pressure from. I mean, we are a research organization after all. It's not about pressure. It's more like a feeling that our library has been stabilized in ways that it's been helpful, tremendously helpful in our participation during Alexa Prize 3. It's helpful right now in Alexa Prize 4. And this allows us to begin work on stabilizing the platform and making decisions what should be actually in the library, what should be deprecated, and so on. Because this, for example, migration to PyTorch, it is important because it would ease the way how we are going to build new models in the library moving forward. And we can't migrate more than 200 models from TensorFlow 1 to PyTorch, or, for example, to TensorFlow 2 or something like that. So we have to prioritize things. And altogether, it feels like a good opportunity to jump to version 1.0 of the library. So I would say this was the main reasons for doing this. Misha, welcome. So I wouldn't say that. I mean, Misha, if you want, tell us if you have any pressure on me to ship version 1 of the library.
Всем привет, просто здесь сразу нельзя говорить, я поэтому не смог сразу сказать.
Я весь community call говорю на английском, Денис говорит на английском, Федя говорит на английском, Миша такой, всем привет на русском. Ну ладно, давай.
So just hi everyone. Because I cannot unmute myself, I was not able to say hi from the beginning.
Yeah. Misha, so Dmitry had a question before you joined us. What's the reason behind shipping version 1 of the library? Why do we want to jump from 0.14 to 1.0? Can you share what you think about it?
Because it's nice to have first digit. Like change 0 to 1. Because some people actually, it's a good strategy. Some people starting just numbering versions from the beginning, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like in a few, like in half of a year, they have a version like 10, and it seems very mature. But if you, for 3 years, you have still like 0.1 or 0.10, it's not very like convincing that your library is already good enough to be used.
So you just want to emphasize that you are already a mature library, right? That's it. We got it.
In some sense, yes, and in another sense, in some sense, it's like a marketing strategy. And but on the other hand, we just came to the point where we want to like introduce some order in our library to make it better structured and more clear, and clean up some obscure models and so on. So this idea of housekeeping makes us thinking about that we need to advance to the next level of versioning of our library. But maybe further we will just increment this first number. We will not do fractions. I don't know. We will decide. I don't know how it is important to have this numbering stuff.
Indeed, it is important. Okay, now folks, if you have any more questions, Mikhail is with us, so you can ask some questions to Mikhail as well. And obviously, if you don't know Mikhail, he is a leader of DeepPavlov Lab, and he's a founder of the project, and he's my boss. So feel free to ask any kind of questions that you want to ask. It's your time. If you don't want to ask questions right now, you can always ask questions on our forum.deepavlov.ai, and you can also fill out the survey. We really ask you to please fill the survey. And we are always available to you once a month on our community calls at 7 p.m. Moscow time and 8 a.m. Pacific Daily Time. So if you have any questions to Mikhail or me, feel free to do it now.
Yeah, I have the last one.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, maybe it's kind of a provocative, but I mean, what's your strategic plans for your library? In the sense that, for instance, other good libraries they are shipped in a free form version, and then with some enterprise features they are shipped with like for some money, right? So are you going to always stay just a library for the research, or library for or not like not only for research, but still only the free form, or are you going to create a enterprise version or something like that? What's your strategic plans? If it's not a secret, marketing secret.
No, it's not a marketing secret. I think I can answer this question, and Mikhail can join me if he wants to. So this is a great question. Library was born as open source library, and it has a very useful, very friendly license of Apache 2.0. We are not restricting any commercial use by GPL like our colleagues from Stanford are doing that. Our strategy is driven by two different directions. One direction is why we're building the library. Library, and I mean the DeepPavlov project as a whole has been designed to enable development of conversational AI systems, chatbots, multi-skill AI systems. So everything we do is to enable building multi-skill AI systems. That's our one of our like top priorities in general, what we strategically want to do. And in that sense, everything that we are working on is it has to be generally free, so that like everybody could build their own distributors of multi-skill AI systems on top of our technology stack. I can, as I shown before, I can give you an example again. So we have this DP, which is a foundation for building multi-skill AI systems, which in turn uses DeepPavlov agent as orchestrator and DeepPavlov library as a supplier of individual components. And here you can see different distributives that you can build using DeepPavlov library and DeepPavlov agent and DeepPavlov DP. So this is, for example, very simple example of DeepPavlov driven multi-skill AI assistant. It has just a couple of skills, a goal-oriented skill and chit-chat skill. We have more complex scenarios. For example, advanced scenario, it's more rich. It has it has components, for example, for spelling pre-processing, entity linking, which we discussed earlier today, sentence segmentation. We have things like goal-oriented skill built using GoBot from DeepPavlov library, and we have emotion classification as well. So this is a more advanced example. What we want to do moving forward is to have more examples of multi-skill AI systems they can build. These are just configurations. So all of the components that I mentioned in those three folders are already here. So we have some skills, 3 skills for now. We have several annotators, and we are going to bring more annotators from the DeepPavlov library to this repository soon. So this is like one of our top priorities is to keep building this kind of thing. So this is one of the strategic directions for us. Another one is obviously to continue supporting more general NLP usage, and things like document processing and so on also are important for us. On another side, do we want to be completely free, or do we want to have commercial side and so on? So we already work with some commercial partners who use our components to solve their problems in their projects, and we are going to continue supporting this kind of a model where we can provide some paid consultancy to build products on top of our technology. For now, it's not really clear we're going to have any commercial features that will be available only to commercial customers, where it's not a consultancy but a paid product features. But it might be probably a very useful way of doing things too. I think Mikhail can share his thoughts on this too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for unmuting me because I cannot speak up.
I know.
Until you let me in.
Of course now.
But actually, as Daniel mentioned, we have few possibilities like paid features. We can develop paid features, and on the different levels, either these paid features will be available for everyone as a part of the library, or be available only for the people who paid for them, and the consultancy for building some solutions on top of our technology. And but maybe in the future we will consider other possibilities, and because we can like use that DeepPavlov and DeepAgent. We want to combine them to build framework like an operating system for personal assistants. And if you look at the examples of open source operating systems, you have something like Linux, and with Linux you have some commercial distributions, and you have Linux Foundation to support it. On the other hand, you have Android, which is also open source in the Apache 2 license, but it's developed and supported only by Google, and is supported mainly from, like, I don't know, Google Play and stuff like that. Anyway, we want to have this open source framework, and also we want to have something like a reference open source personal assistant, which can be installed on your device or on premise, and like have your own Alice or have your own Amazon Alexa with a full source code.
Thanks. Explanation.
Thank you very much for asking all these questions. It's a great example of feedback coming to us. Okay, I think it's a good time to wrap up now. As I said before, we have forum.deepavlov.ai where you can chat with us. You can also go to our project here. The link is in the chat. And you can see how we are building, how we're planning for version 1. We are planning in the open, so you can go and share your thoughts and give your feedback there. We also urge you to use our survey, which is available on the link sent at 8 p.m. today. And we really want to hear what you think and what you want from us. With that, I think I want to say thank you very much for joining us today, for your questions, for feedback. Specific thanks to Dmitry. And Dmitry, if you don't mind, please connect with me at Danielka@deepavlov.ai. Dmitry.
Okay.
Write me down in email. Okay?
Yeah, okay. I'll write one.
Okay, thank you very much. So thanks again to everybody. We will see you next month. We will see you in February. We promise you to not organize event after February 28th, so no February 30th. So it's going to be a real thing. And in the meanwhile, feel free to stay connected with us through the other means. Thank you very much, and see you in February.